Rector Ara a hailches alchi ersúlia tá baile ar gedal sias is mélam buiksam crí ara as an firkin fóse dar to rom hen ris ma fan céile saivin an tara tá teistelum agus ag plécursaí bíg agus an colodrélia catá ag frast ar teistelum. May I say, Rector, that immediately, as I have just said in Irish, that I want to thank you for the very warm welcome that you have offered to Sabina and I, and to the Minister with responsibility for land use and the Minister in the Department of Agriculture, who is such an important responsibility. I also, and all those who are travelling with me, we are also pleased to be here with you, and it was a pleasure to meet some of the students and those who are participating in the most recent incarnation of the college. I think that the exhibition had immediately paid tribute to the curators, and thank you very much for bringing me through it. I'm always very interested when I hear about the people speaking about when in relation to the birth of Europe. The birth of Europe is a most contested space, but it is appropriate that Columbanus be given credit for it. For example, insofar as I am in Rome and in Italy, I believe others who may not get sufficient attention in relation to the birth of Europe are the people who produced the Ventotene Accord, Barbarossi and Spinelli. I think when one thinks about their desire for peace in prison and in Ireland, and their vision is in fact would become to be described as federalism, but it was one of a Europe that would never again be at war, and a Europe that would be at peace. So I always take the opportunity of trying to give credit where it has been insufficiently denied to Rossi and to Spinelli and those. I think it is, you make reference, Rector, to why the principle, one of the activities that I've had is in fact in relation to participating in the Food Forum. It's most important because participating in it are scientists, young people, and those who are working on the ground to supply food to those who are hungry. Hunger as a global phenomenon has increased since the end of COVID. The increase is 150 million people. These are not abstract figures, they are people who are starving. The figure projected for 2030 is the same figure as was there in 2015, 870 million people. It's one of the great, and as far as I am in a college that celebrates the spirit, it is one of the great disgraces of the human species that it has not been able to feed its people, even though there is enough food in the world to feed everybody. Because at the same time as there are shortages, there are disgraceful wastages. Thank you, Kevin. Can you hear me at the moment? I have the capacity to speak louder, if you like, because of my long training on ditches over the years in Ireland. So I've been at the Food Forum. You mentioned also, Rector, my earlier meeting today with Pope Francis. In Pope Francis and I discussed those issues of food. We discussed also, of course, something you mentioned, and which is very relevant for the exhibition here this evening, migration. I think as we go through the panels in cases, from, as it has been accurately described as from what is then perceived as the end of the earth centre, the mission was not one of insisting on certainties, but one of, in fact, bringing the gifts of scholarship to ever more places. And of course, that legacy that has been left by the different monasteries that you mentioned. Of course, I say that one of the curators in University College Cork, there was, those of us who are interested in poetry there were some very contentious remarks made about the illustration of manuscripts and so forth. One very unpopular Irishman suggested that people were spending so much time on recording that they couldn't possibly be original. It was, as I said, a disgraceful suggestion. But I think, isn't it something that we can all be very proud of Irish people? Of people to say, what is that you have to give? You have to give scholarship and to give respect for scholarship. And that is something perhaps the European Union might recover, because it is before coal and steel, and it is before issues of trade, and it is before competitiveness. That is in fact in the transcendental world of the spirituality, that there was something magnificent to be shared, and that it had been expressed in its most beautiful and artistic forms. I think when I think tomorrow I speak to, among others, young people, and I think it's very, very important that they be allowed a scholarship that can examine the assumptions of all of where we have come to be, our burning planet, our 870 million people who are hungry, our people who are forced populations, our migrants, that the scandalous inability, if you like, to meet the basic necessities of life, in health and housing and elsewhere. And it is to the great credit of those Irish who, like Columbanus, have left their own shores and gone to share what are the instincts of their spirit and their heart in seeking to address these issues. I'm delighted that the thinking as well of the Pontifical Irish College of Lugarding of 1625. These Irish colleges we must remember as well, while we may make reference in the exhibition to the Carolingian Empire. These Irish colleges in many cases are in fact deeply influenced by the suppression of religious rights at home in the later period. And certainly, I'm continually remember the people used to say that the Irish lose their language. The Irish language was prohibited. The Irish language was prescribed. It was people were punished for using their language and so on. And that is why I think these colleges were very, very important as locations, not just of the spirit, but of rights. I think that the college is a very fitting venue for the launch of this exhibition. I think it is, of course, in a way, which is very, very interesting. What Schumann said, I think, about Columbanus, it was about what Europe might be in gracious united Europe, rather than a Europe that what was. And Europe is very much something that is in the making. It's too easy to trot off the tongue to speak of European values that uses a principle of exclusion of other people's belief systems. Europe is not a finished dream. In many, many ways it has much to recover from its past, including Columbanus, but it is also new things that it has to do, new forms of cooperation. I think it's very interesting to see the reference I think that it is very, very interesting that the consequences are in relation to the Carolingian Empire. It's I think that the word empire itself, it's very important that we have the courage to address what imperialism was. I share something with you. When I was recently constructing Mochnef series and addressing the issues of the excesses of nationalism and the excesses of different things, that which I found people most difficult to deal with was imperialism. Imperialism had a kind of a fancy notion of imperialism and its artifacts, when in fact the mind of empire is a mind of exclusion, of lessening, a life of seeing others. Be it, this was one of the things today I congratulated His Holiness Pope Francis on the document of renouncing discovery. The idea that you were finding a new land, that the people in it were less than human, in some cases it began like that, were then incapable of managing the earth, from which they had a very close relationship, or of even doing it in a way that was similar to what was happening elsewhere. I think that it was interesting in many ways. And frankly, the other side of it is in the restoration of the reunification of the necessary factors of mind that enable us to have something that Columbanus expressed. It means actually dealing with the residue of empire and eliminating it from our thought. I think the monasteries that he founded in Anna-Grin-Fontaine, in Bobbio, I remember Bobbio, how incredibly that is what actually Columbanus was doing was making a Europe of the spirit. And in a way, that is the unfinished tasks. He had the vision to go beyond borders, beyond individual nations. And in his letter in the 7th century to the French bishops, we are all members of one body, whether Franks or Britons or Irish or whatever our race. Such an open and inclusive mindset is the one that we would all be very well to invoke at this time, when we see that the natural movements of migration, which have been there since Homo sapiens first left Africa, then in fact it isn't a case of protecting ourselves from the other, but of seeking to understand the circumstances of the arrival of the other. And in a way, these interacting crises we now face of migration, world hunger, world poverty, climate change, and I think of it again, the moral significance. There's the emissions for which the entire continent of Africa is responsible for is 4%. And yet all of the statistics in relation to hunger and the statistics on all the dead animals, the destroyed earth, the desertification and so forth, stands back. And so therefore it is not only an offence against reason and rationality to be excluding what are obvious responsibilities for those who have given us a burning planet and a destructive form of connection between economy, ecology and society. It's actually a moral responsibility to be able to think anew, and I think that would be the spirit of Columbanus. I think Pope Francis has said to us as well, something that was very Columbanist, is that the European project was born of a realization that unity and cooperation that unity is greater than conflict, and that solidarity can be a way of making history in a life setting where conflicts, tensions and oppositions can achieve a diversified and life-giving unity. Unfortunately, we find ourselves in a circumstance where one has to actually struggle to get it established by way of a suggestion that peace and cooperation are the natural instincts of the human species, but rather the suggestion is that our life can only continue if we are perpetually at war, which is a great species failure. And when it has to be placed into the context of the loss of other forms of diversity, it's just an incredible indictment of what we have. But it is an invitation to the making of something new, which is what we're about in these meetings today, these meetings this week in Rome. I also think as well that I noticed in the panels and reading about Columbanus is that he had a respect for language, and he was a respected linguist and scholar. I think that is very important, combining, if you like, linguistic ability with a strong mind, and even more important, a strong character. He adapted to the languages and the customs of historic kingdoms and kingdoms that were fading and kingdoms that were at the point of emergence. I think his life is a testament to the place and value of intellectual work and the commitment and that intellectual work demands, the patience that intellectual work demands. And I think given the particular audience that's standing in front of me, how in fact such intellectual work is a bedrock of diplomacy. It is a fact upon which everything else depends. It not far beyond speech is what was intention in both the mind and the heart. St. Columbanus be it in the tradition that he established of reflection, manuscript illumination or prayer. I think we in Ireland can look back upon those days as the times of some of our most significant contributions to the others who would come to be the place that we now call the European Union. It's a testament to his influence in a globalized 21st century that his memory is still so powerful enough to be able to create occasions like this. That wealth of manuscript produced in Ireland by Irish scribes on the continent, they're in libraries across Europe. And it is interesting as well that when people visit places throughout the European Union, I like it when they ask to go to bookshops and to go to libraries and to go to manuscripts, rather like that. That's so different, if you like, from the family photo and the quick script. I think there are reminders of the importance of exchange in knowledge sharing and knowledge generation. And I think as well, which is very good and which is here, and I remember visiting here, you said indeed, and I had my third visit, is Malam go will an gaige in Úsad, agus gacuair a tháinig mé bhí sé in Úsad san Coláiste, agus trís liamle as gacrad atá deanta, de cuasaí scoláireachta í do litríocht na hÉireann, stair na hÉireann, agus an tábhad atá went leis an ábhar deanachs na maniste éasúile fud scamp fud na Europa. I do, for that reason, pay so much tribute to Dr. Damien Bracken of University College Cork, Tris Liam Lad, agus Tris Liam le Dr. Angela Byrne of the Department of Foreign Affairs, who researched, wrote and curated the exhibition. Cogardicus live as a made at Bunja Markaki. I think the fact that the exhibition has been seen in Ireland, in the Han Museum, and across Europe, Bulgaria, Croatia, Germany, Serbia, and Hungary, and further afield the United States and Japan. It's an impressive one. I think Toshed and Ska agus Tris Liam live. May I suggest that our celebration today of Columbanus and his followers is an opportunity to reflect on how important it is, not the gift it is, to be secure in one's own identity, but how universal importance it is, and how it must encourage us to explore and engage with these perspectives and narratives of the other. To reflect the concept, I think, is such an alternative to the concept of setting up sieges in our experiences, in our lives, or in our expectations. I reached Tris Liam na curators. I'm so pleased to be able to have had the opportunity of seeing this exhibition. It's been a great pleasure. And I want to thank you all for Mila Buick as a Club.